is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The meeting is now called to order. The time is 7:21 p.m. on August 8, 2006. The board consists of 5 members and 1 alternate. The alternate takes full part in discussions of the board and becomes a voting member in the absence or conflict of interest of a regular member. Present this evening are members John Golsey, Greg Lavelle, David Shafee, and I, Muriel Frederick, the chair, Betty Hollow, and Roger Gruser. Betty Hollow is absent.
Come on in.
You're not ready?
Do come in, but just a little.
Didn't start at 7:30.
7 o'clock.
Oh, is it 7?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
But I'm so glad you're here. We're all glad you're here, because now we're not going to have to ask people if they would like to continue. Right? As we have a full board with our alternate taking the place of Betty Hollow. Also present are zoning administrator Steve Pearson, Paul Eschenbacher, our acting secretary, and Michael Miller from the law director's office. The board operates according to the following procedures. The chair names and describes the case. The zoning administrator will cite the specifics of the refusal. The appellant or a representative then will state the case for granting the appeal. Testimony next will be taken from those who support granting the appeal, then those who want to speak in general comment, and those who support denial of the appeal. Following all testimonies, the board will receive concluding remarks from the appellant, and discussion from the floor then will be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. Under Athens City Code Section 230703B, the board has the power to grant such variances from the code as will not be contrary to the public interest, so that the spirit of the code shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Athens City Code Section 230910C requires that variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the evidence provided to it, that each and every one of the following 6 criteria are met. Number 1, practical difficulty or undue hardship. There must exist a practical difficulty or an undue hardship caused by exceptional circumstances pertaining to the specific piece of property. Number 2, exceptional circumstances. There must exist exceptional circumstances or conditions applying to the property or its intended use that do not in general apply to properties in the same zoning district. Number 3, preservation of equal property rights. It must be determined that literal interpretation of the code would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same vicinity, while granting the variance would not convey a special privilege. Number 4, minimum variance. It must be determined that the variance is the minimum required to make reasonable use of the property. Number 5, absence of detriment. It must be determined that the granting of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties, nor materially impair purposes of the code or the public interest. And last, number 6, not of a general nature. The variance sought must not be of a general or recurring nature, such that the situation would more reasonably be handled by changing the law. The board also is empowered to hear and decide applications for conditional use, substitution for non-conforming use, temporary uses, and appeals where it's alleged by the appellant that there's an error in the decision made by the zoning administrator regarding enforcement and interpretation of the code. Any person who is aggrieved by the decision of the board may file an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the board's resolution to the appellant. Tonight there are 3 cases on the agenda. Number 0616V for 12 Strathmore Boulevard, which is zoned R2. James Carageorge is the appellant. Number 0617V for 121 Morris Avenue, zoned R1. Kimberly Mather is the appellant. And number 0620V for 7 West Stimson Avenue, zoned R1. Hocking Valley Bank is the appellant. On the agenda, the one for 121 Morris Avenue, there's been a request for a continuance, so we will not actually be hearing that one this evening. The appellant can't be present until next month's meeting on the 12th. So we actually will be hearing only two of the three cases that are on the agenda. The board is required by law to take testimony under oath. Anyone wishing to speak, please stand to be sworn. Even if you remotely think you might speak, please stand to be sworn. Do you swear the testimony you will give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. The first case on the agenda this evening is number 0616V for 12 Strathmore Boulevard. It actually was continued from last month for some additional information. And but last month Betty Hollow was here and is not here tonight. And we have one member who was not present last month. So even though, Steve, you did present the specifics of the refusal, would you please do it again for us?
My name is Steve Pearson. I'm the zoning administrator for the city of Athens. And because Mr. Golsey was not here, I think we can just review some of the information. Each of you had information provided concerning the case, and the file is right there too. The structure or the lot in question is mid-block on Strathmore between East State Street and Jacobs. What was presented to you, and there was some discussion about the layout of the proposed building and the lot size. The file indicates dimensions of the lot, excuse me, the location of existing structures that have hash marks in one direction, an indication of existing structure to be demolished that's hash marked in a different direction, and then a white or a blank area indicating the additional footprint that's being requested. There are two lots involved. Mr. George owns two lots instead of just one. The proposal required three variances, one for a rear yard setback of just over 25 feet, where 30 feet is the permitted minimum, so there's a 5-foot variance needed for the rear yard. Lot coverage of 32.4%, where 30 is the maximum, so that's a variance of 2.4%. And a left side setback of 3.9 feet, where 8 feet is the permitted minimum. Mr. Chris Gehrig, who's representing Mr. Kara George, had also provided a narrative statement addressing the points that are required of an appellant. So it's a written letter that has to be submitted with the appeal. And included in the file were 8 letters of support for Mr. Kara George. People in the neighborhood had asked that the board favorably consider the variance request. Another thing that I'd mentioned related to the two lots that Mr. Kara George owns. It's not unusual, but it's not typical in that neighborhood that structures are on two lots. As indicated on the plan, his existing right side setback is 21, I believe it's 21 feet. Yeah. Actually 21 and a half feet to the property line to the north. Because the addition's going on the opposite side of the house, though, you know, it's pushing toward that other southerly property line. So there's no problem with the combination yard. You have to have at least 20 feet in combination of your 2 yards. So it's just for one setback variance on the side, not a combination setback variance, just because of that large distance between the existing home and the home directly to the north. One of the things that the board, I believe, had a question about at the last meeting was even though the request was for a left side setback of 3.9 feet, how far was that actually from structures on the adjacent lot? And the additional information, the only additional information that I provided to you was a drawing that I did. I went out to the site, and Mr. Kara George was gracious enough to show me around, show me what he wanted to do, and from that visit that we had, then I generated that drawing. I think there was a question at the last meeting about how close the garage was on the adjacent property. That garage is basically right on the property line. It's a grandfathered, non-conforming setback. It was something that evidently was built before the code. And it illustrates, too, that accessory structure, non-living structure, and how close it is to the property line or to the addition proposal. The majority of area, all but just a couple feet, of what Mr. Kara George proposes is a distance of 19 feet from the actual living structure, the dwelling itself. So it is very close to the garage, but quite a distance from the house next door. I went on down the street. The next two houses have 14 feet between them, and the next two have 16 between them. And this proposal would be 19 feet.
The usual concerns about houses being close together is because of fire, jumping from one to another in case of fire, but it sounds like 14 feet has been, it's even closer on the other side of the neighbor's house than it would be with this. That's what you're showing us.
Right. Now, the zoning code actually just mentions light and ventilation as considerations for setbacks. Although in practical terms, yes, if structures are very close to each other, there is the potential for fire jumping very quickly. Our fire department has a call-out time of, I believe, right around 3 minutes to any report of a fire on the east side of town. It is a little distance for them to go from the station up on Columbus Road, but they can get there very quickly. It's all downhill, so they're screaming all the way out there. And their response time is right around, I believe, right around 3 minutes in case of a fire. Another thing I wanted to point out on the drawing, the part that Mr. Kara George wants to build on the back that's like a covered patio that's not enclosed, doesn't have sides on it, that's what's adjacent to the garage.
Excepting for that one little corner of the garage that
I think there's just a couple feet there in common of the back of the garage, of his proposed garage with the other garage.
Okay.
There's, like I said, there's plenty of room there. If you could just take his house now and push it to the north, there wouldn't be a problem. But it is where it's at the site.
And it's the 3.9 feet that's the problem still.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the distance, the measurement requirement is not from a structure on an adjacent lot. It's from a structure or from the property line. So, for example, you could have two vacant lots. You could have a property line right down the middle, and people could build on each one of those lots and have their buildings 16 feet apart. That would be permitted. Also, if you build a garage, it can be, I guess, permitted or legally as close as 5 feet to a property line, so long as it's detached from the house. So you could really get someone who built, if your house was compliant at 8, the neighbor's garage was compliant at 5, like with a blank slate, I could permit 8, 10, 13 feet between a detached garage and a house.
The neighbor could and be within code and put an addition on their house that would bring them within 8 feet of the property line, right?
That's correct. But
Then,
that's also the area of their driveway that goes back to their garage. And the way the code's written now, if you change a structure, remodel it, change it in any way, you have to meet or maintain the parking requirement. So if you build an addition, there may or may not be compliance with parking regulations. I would say, now that I'm thinking about it, the house is 35 feet back. you might be able to get 2 cars in the driveway. So it could be a owner-occupied home or a rental for 2 people, not for 3, if you build an addition on the side of the house to the south. Another thing, well, I kind of want to backtrack too. Even though light and ventilation are all the zoning code talks about, fire is another consideration, as you mentioned. And a lot of times, the distances between buildings is something so the fire department or EMS or anybody who needs to do emergency response can get to it. So, for example, the zoning code is written where 2 garages could be 10 feet apart if the property line were right in the middle. And then there's the ability then for the fire department to say get down through there, pull a hose, whatever it was that they had to do.
So 10 feet is considered to be the distance
Well,
apart that's
you're
required.
assuming that the zoning code had some kind of thought about fire safety.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying, was it doesn't say that, but in practical terms, I think
Practice.
there are those kind of considerations. I think we're very fortunate that we have a fire department that does have such a high ISO rating. I mean, it helps everybody's insurance that we can respond. It's much different than volunteer fire departments that have extended response times. So residents of the city are fortunate that we have a full-time fire department for that. Another thing that I noticed, this is a pre-code construction neighborhood, not that that makes any difference. The houses basically, even though this is a little different, but most of them are built right at the 25-foot setback on the front. But for some reason, they all seem to be pushed way over to the side, including their accessory structures. So, and I guess to reiterate again, the one thing I did want to illustrate was that's an open-sided, really, I'm not going to call it a non-habitable area, but the basic part of the proposal is an open porch that's adjacent to the garage on the neighboring property. Basically, the distance between the 2 living areas of Mr. Carageorge's property and Mr.
The
Conrad's
terrace, you
property.
mean, you're talking about.
Yeah, on the
That
back.
is, yeah,
See, it shares about whatever that distance is in common. Remember, too, there's a fence in between there now, too. Well, I don't have the drawing with me, but I think it's 11 feet is the depth of the covered terrace. Let's see, yeah, 11 feet.
Whose fence is that?
That's Mr. Carageorge's fence. It is approximately 2 feet on his property. That's my estimation of where it's at. And that way he has the ability to maintain the fence without going on to the neighboring property. He can get on the backside of it, maintain his fence, take care of it. So that's not a problem. The code allows fences built right on the property line, but that gets a little problematic if you have to go next door to do maintenance on the fence.
yeah, you should be friendly with your neighbors. Okay, well, thank you. Does anybody have questions for Steve? You've all heard it before.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very
All right,
much.
you're welcome.
I guess at this point, we're ready to hear from hear again.
President of the Board, Frederick, other members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, thank you for the opportunity to appear tonight. I'm Chris Gehrig, serving as counsel for Mr. Jim Carageorge here tonight in regard to his proposed variance. I will not go through the entire presentation I gave last time because most of you have heard it, but I would like to take the opportunity to emphasize a few points and add to the materials from the last time we were here. Did all of the board members have an opportunity to see a copy of the sketch that Mr. Pearson
We
was
have seen-
referencing as far as the...
Mr. Gehrig, I just had a question to ask you. You did not stand to swear. Is there a reason that you don't do that?
As counsel...
As counsel, you don't.
as-
That was the question.
I'll defer to Mr. Miller, but I was always under the assumption as counsel I was simply representing...
You're just representing, and so you don't swear.
The position that I present is not given under my personal oath.
I've never ever
but-
noticed before or paid any attention to whether you did or
I
not.
did stand the last time because
thought
I
you
wanted to join in the testimony to state that I
That's
had no
why.
objection.
Oh, I
And
see.
I think I did make mention of that when I came to the podium,
Okay, that's
that
the
I am a
difference.
person who lives one block up and I wanted to.
So you were, at that point, you were speaking as a member of the community?
Yes,
And
and-
then you moved into your,
Yes,
And you
and
do
maybe I didn't
represent-
make that clear enough, but that is why I did it last time. If there is any concern about my presentation
No.
not being given under oath,
Not
I'd
at all.
certainly be glad
Actually,
to.
it's very interesting what you're telling me in any event. I had no idea that that was the case.
Under
Interesting.
the rules of the court, if I were presenting the position of my client, I would not be doing that. I would never take the stand, for example, even though I might be
Understand.
speaking. Is that your understanding as far as counsel for the city as well?
seems reasonable to me too.
Well,
So-
like I say, if there is any concern, I'd certainly be willing to take an oath at this time.
Not at all, thank you very much.
Did all of the board members then have an opportunity to see the schematic that Mr. Pearson prepared? Because I did bring several copies with me here tonight as well. I also wanted to take the opportunity to present to the board. You've seen that the project is without opposition within the neighborhood. I have 5 additional letters of people in the neighborhood that were so interested in this project that they've actually asked for the opportunity to present their
Well,
position.
I haven't seen those.
Introduce that.
Thank you.
Consider. Finally, it's rare that I appear before the board with a multimedia presentation, but I actually have several pictures that I have brought with me here tonight that I'd like to introduce in evidence. I think this might help illustrate, so in the event that you've not had a chance to make it out to the site, exactly what we're talking about here. I'll go through them one by one and then turn it over for the board to consider. But the first one is the front of Mr. Kara George's house, the structure itself right now. You can see that it is a brick structure, constructed in a pretty solid manner, and I thought that might do a good job of showing you the appearance of the tenor of this structure will be maintained under the plan that we're presenting here tonight. The second one actually demonstrates for you the adjoining lot that we're going to be moving closer to. You can see the adjoining house, the separated structure of the garage, and then you also have a representation of where Mr. Kara George's house will be built into, as far as that goes. Just as a point of reference for the board, the house that he's building next to actually has a very similar scenario to what he's talking about here, which is a building that actually encroaches within the 8 feet, a separated garage, and then another structure. I'd like to emphasize once again, Mr. Kara George's structure will actually be further apart than what the adjoining house is to his on the other side of it. Would also like to point out, I don't know why the house was built where it was on these 2 lots, but there's an abundance of area on the other side of the house. You simply cannot redo the main structure of the house, or else we would not be here before the board tonight. But this does, I think, help to illustrate how much yard is on the other side of the house. Finally, we have a close-up of how close things are on that other structure. Just for reference to the board, I have a variety of other pictures that serve to illustrate some of these points as far as other houses in the neighborhood. But rather than take up the board's time going through each one of those one by one, I'll just keep those in reserve if there's any further point of discussion you'd like to have on that. So, turn those over to there as well. Finally, the last time I appeared before the board, it was the opinion of the board, I think, that you wanted to be able to speak to the builder himself to hear why the plan was designed the way it was. I won't presume to steal Mr. Brooks' thunder, but after speaking to him a little more, I would like to emphasize it is his opinion and Mr. Carador's opinion that the structure has already been trimmed to the maximum that it can, in his opinion, that it can be allowed to do. That in order to have a 2-car garage that would be able to handle the larger vehicles, the SUVs that we commonly have today, and also the storage space that would be expected for a garage of this nature, you're really going to need to have what's being proposed here tonight, as far as his professional opinion as a builder. Before I cede the podium, are there any questions you'd like to pose to me before I step away?
Any questions? Not yet. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Brooks with Brooks Builders. I was hired by Mr. Kara George several months ago to design an addition to his house with the primary concern to obtain a decent-sized garage to put both cars in and to maintain some storage space. We looked at the existing structure and picked the logical point to demolish what we could off the existing house. Going any further would not be feasible. Then we designed a structure, what I would design by normal standards, which came out larger than what our final decision is. We've revised this several times, spent several months working on it, and to maintain a garage suitable for two cars, especially the SUVs and stuff you get today, and Jim does own one, and to be able to make it functional, we've determined that that's about as far as we can trim it and obtain what he was after to begin with.
So is he going to put two SUVs in there? Is that the idea?
Well, if you take, it's got an 18-foot garage door, and your main garage area is going to be about 24 feet with a little bit of storage on the right side for a lawnmower.
We don't have a plan of the addition here at all.
Well, we
All
did
we've
have a
got is
plan
rough
last,
drawing.
we had a plan last week,
Yeah, I know,
but
we don't have one, we haven't been able to share it with him. Do you have the,
I have a,
yeah, I thought I brought with me from last month the drawings that we had, and I picked up the wrong file.
currently, get my focus here. Main garage area overall inside is 30 feet 8 inches, but part of the laundry room and stuff protrudes out into it. So he's going to be able to maintain a minimal amount of storage for a lawnmower and stuff on the right side. 24 feet is pretty much minimum to get vehicles in without banging doors into the walls or into each other. We've designed it without any post in the middle to allow the maximum amount of space, or the minimum amount of space we could get by with without having to avoid posts. But 24 feet to me is pretty much the minimum you can get by with.
so what you're saying is it's 24 foot from
Well,
this point to this point?
Well, 24 is going to hit somewhere in here. You've got a little bit of storage in here. You've got a total of 30 feet 8.
But from this point to this point,
You've got
it's,
12, you've got 27 to here.
okay, so it's 27 foot wide, not 24, is that correct?
On the interior in this section,
Yeah,
it is correct.
Yeah. So that's the minimum
But
distance.
the other concern he had was being able to store lawnmower, having some storage in this area on the right side. To maintain that and be able to walk by it without rubbing up against the car is the other concern. You could jam it up. I mean, to maintain the storage, you wouldn't be able to. If you load that up and shrunk the garage in it, you wouldn't be able to open the car door on that
This is
side.
approximately where the house comes to now, is right here,
That is
more
not.
or less.
Well,
You had it, there was a drawing
no,
that we
the
had
garage
last
sits
week.
in here. Yeah, it's right.
Oh, okay.
This is the existing laundry utility
Right,
area,
okay,
and then
that's
this
the-
was
that's
the
the
garage.
current
So it's
garage.
coming out
It's about halfway.
halfway. Yeah.
About halfway, all right. So you're about doubling.
Which is a single car
space.
garage currently.
This is what you don't have. This is what we were given last week. And it shows, this is the current house with the little sort of setback. Did you get a chance to go out and see it? Yeah, this is the garage and this is the little setback area and the main house. And then essentially you're adding, they're going to demolish this and add on an addition about the same size as the house. It's essentially doubling the footprint of the house.
Maybe that picture that you just covered up would help illustrate what this area is. There we go.
No, wrong one.
brick front.
Here's the.
Yeah, that's the existing. And we're trying to maintain this space back to, for the utility and storage area that was already
That's that?
there. This is about what that was to begin with. So then you get the two-car garage on and be able to have any room to get in and out of the vehicle. Initially, I had it designed bigger, and then went and realized we were over the property line, so we trimmed it as tight as I thought we could trim it.
And less than 4 feet really makes that much difference? I mean,
Well-
with only 3.9 feet, you could be within code on the thing, but that'll really make a big
You
difference?
wouldn't be able to open your car doors.
Yeah, okay.
Now,
I can see.
I don't mean to be argumentative, but a 24-foot garage accommodates car doors.
Not very well, but
They do, and 90% of the homes built, and you know that as well as I do.
yeah,
And you're talking 27.
well, this is,
And she's remarking about 3 foot, and I'm just trying to get things in perspective.
to
Oh,
gain a little bit of
23.
storage space
Uh-huh.
and be able to get in and out of two vehicles. Vehicles are much larger than they were.
The bigger the garage is, the handier it is. I wouldn't argue
Yeah.
that at all.
Start hanging rakes on the wall or anything else and try to open car doors and walk beside your car, it's pretty inconvenient.
But if you're crowding the property line, are you going to be utilizing that luxury, or are you going to?
Yeah, well, it really, wherever the picture is, I can't find it. Yeah, here. It isn't so much crowding going on, actually, because of the way it's set up. That's what you realize when you look at it. But when you look at it here, it really is kind of, you get a different kind of picture. I just wondered about that 3.9 feet. I needed to ask.
We tried to trim that and it just became
It
unworkable
seems
to
like
get the
there's-
space that it needed.
There's such a lot of space, but I understand being up against that hard place called a house.
You know, if the house was shifted on the original lots,
It's such a cute house the way it is, but I can understand that cute isn't what you need when you need space. So you maintain all of your storage space and you get a garage this way. Sounds good? Okay. Any questions about what's going on?
Just really wanted to share it
Yeah,
with
because-
John, because
because
he wasn't.
I can print them off.
If you could leave them for the file, Steve would like to have it. That'd be wonderful. And the letters, yeah, we need to get those into the, wherever they went.
You can see it's last slide.
The letters, there they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions at all? Okay. At the moment, we have 4 more letters from, and they're all from Strathmore residents this time, all in support of Mr. George's plan to,
Same writing except different.
yeah, it's the same letter, but it's signed by 5 Strathmore Boulevard and 6 Strathmore Boulevard and 4 Strathmore Boulevard. Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble reading the signatures. Anna Barrows and Russell Barrows. And 5 Strathmore has signed it. And
2 from 5.
2 from 5 Strathmore, and 2 from 4, and 1 from 6 Strathmore. So, and that joins the others from last month that we had. So it seems that the neighbors are in support of this addition, which
In this agreeable neighborhood.
very agreeable neighborhood. I can understand why you'd want to just add on and stay. It seems like your neighbors are real friendly. Okay. Well, let's see. That would conclude the presentation for. Is there anyone here who wants to speak in general comment?
I'm Joseph Richard Sligo, and I live at 102 North Lancaster Street. every once in a while, somebody asks me, why are you interested in something that isn't next door to you? Well, when I served on the board for 2 years, I was interested in the city of Athens, and I still am, and I continue to. Now, if you'll recall, the continuation, in the minutes to make it clear, we wanted the builder here to explain why he had to build the way he did. I assume that since you have studied some diagrams that I haven't, you're in a better position to evaluate what you ought to do about the variances. The only thing I want to do is to remind the board that sometimes it's very difficult to make decisions, especially when the neighborhood is in favor of it. However, I think the board has to remember its mission and its duty. And all I would do is urge the board to give very careful consideration before it votes to grant the variance that involved the footage that I raised a question about the last time. You remember the 3.9 feet or whatever it was. Now, the diagrams that I saw Mr. Gary have, I saw enough of them from the side that I don't need to ask the chair for permission to look at them. I'm quite familiar with the property. Mr. Kerr George will be a very good citizen, I'm sure, while he lives there, and so will the neighbors. Now, with that, may I say that there are 2 other variances that were asked for. I'm not speaking about those. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see any major problem with that. The board, I think, has to make a decision here in terms of not only this property, but what it means for the whole city of Athens. With the understanding that we have all kinds of crazy lots, and the board does exist to make variances. The board also has the authority under the law to be quasi-judiciary in a sense, and I also learned about Mr. Gary for the first time. That came as a new lesson in law to me. But I think that if the case were to be appealed for any reason, a judge would look at that and say, well, he's an attorney, he ought to know he was under oath, so to speak. I may be wrong. Anyhow, I urge the board to give thoughtful consideration to what the builder had said and what Mr. Gary said, and even though Mr. Kerr George is not up here. And also, I did not follow the question about the footage on the garage. I was changing my hearing aid, and I did hear Mr. Gruser say he didn't want to be argumentative, and I'm sure he doesn't. Thank you, Madam Chair, for permitting me to comment. I appreciate Mr. Gruser's comments. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. And there's no one here who's wanting to speak against. Do you have anything further than that you want to say in, it's summation time for the appellant if you want to make one?
If I may.
Yes, please.
I think Mr. Slight certainly raises some good points. We would like to emphasize, however, that the nature of our variance in this case, even included in the write-up, is one of a very select nature. Part of our factor write-up emphasizes that this is an unusual circumstance that applies just to the specific nature of the variance requested here tonight. We would submit, based on the write-up we have submitted to you tonight, that we are not seeking to set precedent for the city of Athens. We are simply requesting a very narrowly tailored variance in regard to the code. And I think if you look at my write-up that I have presented to the board, it is structured very much in that nature.
Yeah, or because we do each case by itself, I think that it's pretty well been established that we don't set precedent here because that's not what this board doesn't operate from precedent, so.
Indeed. I felt compelled to at least
Yeah.
get that into the record, though, since there had been a general comment offered in that vein. Would finally like to note for the board, that this is a project, as far as the neighborhood is concerned, that we very much want to see the board approve. You are hard-pressed to find anyone that would be against it. In fact, several people have taken their time to tell the board how interested they are in having this forward.
Having it. Okay. Okay.
If you could summarize, your justification for the hardship, why can't this property be utilized as it is now, and why do we have to go through this? What is the hardship?
The hardship in this nature is you have two lots with a structure that was constructed prior to the code. When they built this structure back in, I think I put it into my write-up, it was well before the code was passed. No one could have dreamed that if you ever wanted to make an improvement on it to allow for a larger size, that the fact that they built a house on two lots too close to one side would have any kind of meaningful impact. This is a brick structure. It is a brick structure that is located too far on one side of two lots to allow you to do anything if you do want to change the nature of the building, but to ask the board for a variance here tonight. Very clearly, the main part of the house right now, the very nice structure that Mrs. Frederick references, made out of brick, is not going to be movable and needs to be preserved. It has a lot of value to it. But the enhancement that we're going to make to this structure can really only be pursued in the manner that Mr. Brooks outlined for you. And that is the essence of the hardship.
I would like you to address number 4, the minimum variance part. I don't have a problem myself with anything else, excepting I don't see how. I'm having trouble with the minimum, with it being minimal. It's determining that it's the minimum required to make reasonable use of the property. I don't see. Could you explain to me why?
Given the dollars that are going to be committed to this project, given the nature of the design, you've heard Mr. Brooks's testimony here tonight, that it is his professional opinion that it must be this size in order to accomplish his builder goal. He has already trimmed the size of the project from what he felt professionally would be an acceptable size for this structure. What we ask for, in his professional opinion, is the minimum that could be given if the project was to be done in the manner that he, as a professional, feels should be pursued.
Do I understand then you to be saying that if it's not possible, if he can't get that extra 3.9 feet, that Mr. Karageorge is unwilling to pursue the addition to the house?
It's not that we're, I hate to put it in adversarial terms, and it's not that we're saying that we're not willing to pursue it, but I doubt the project would go forward because he has received the opinion of his builder for him to accomplish the plan that as it has been designed, it needs to be this size in order for it to be constructed. I would emphasize once again, though, even though we are asking for a variance of several feet, we ask for nothing more than is already commonly accepted in the neighborhood. And in fact, there is more spacing between.
Yeah,
the,
we've seen that. That part, it inclines me to feel, it seems like it would look good, and it would not be, it wouldn't be looking exceptional in the neighborhood. It would look like other houses in the neighborhood. But we're supposed to find that this is the minimum to make possible the reasonable use of the property, and that's if that's
the best. You know,
that's the thing.
I could not give testimony on this the last time, and so I thus elected to continue the hearing.
Right.
Because I felt the need to bring the builder to give his professional opinion. I think you've heard that.
And we've heard his opinion, right.
And I don't think there was any equivocation on his part as far as the plan as it's been submitted here tonight.
Okay. That's the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? No. Thank you. Well, if there's no further discussion, then I guess it's all closed and we're ready to consider the findings. Do we have anything we need to talk about, or do we want to do it as we go through the findings?
Yeah, just
Just
take
do
a
it,
motion or
okay.
something.
Would someone like to make a motion then to grant this variance? I think there was one. No, there wasn't, because we never got that far.
There are actually 3 variances being requested,
Right.
so I
Well, I
don't know if you want to go through the findings for each one of the 3 and consider it, or consider it all as one package.
I think this makes it one, very much related to each other.
They are related, but it's not all the same, is it?
I mean, I'm not really,
I mean,
I don't have an opinion one way or the other,
variance is
but,
not gonna do any good without the other two.
I mean, just because the main objection, the discussion has all been about the
Yes, I
3.9
think of it
feet
as a
and
single
not about
variance,
anything
but
else.
it is actually three?
Right. You have a lot coverage
Yeah.
of 2.4% additional, a rear setback of 5 feet is a necessary variance, and the side of 4.1 feet. So there's three different ones.
Thank you. It would be a lot more clear if we were to do them one at a time. But it would be time consuming, and I'm not sure that it would really serve any purpose to do it one at a time.
If in the professional opinion of the builder, this is an optimal design, then I would say if we grant one variance and don't do the other two, then it's not going to be any good to them. That variance is not going to be any use to them.
Yeah.
We would be willing to waive a separate vote if that makes it easier for the board to move forward with this.
Oh, thank you.
If that makes it.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I believe that in the past, Steve, when we've had multiple, we've treated them as sort of multiple parts of a variance. It's a single. We're gonna deal with the request, but we can craft it in such a way that it's all part of the same request, even though it's multiple variances required for the request for the property.
I can explain what
Go ahead.
Because I've mentioned that the most objectionable part of the appeal seems to be the 3.9 side setback.
It's not the most objectionable, it's just the one that's the hardest to find for, I think. Anyway, in my personal opinion, but anyway.
Well, what I was thinking of was, for example, if that was the most objectionable and the other two were not, the other two were viewed favorably and the side was not, then Mr. Karageorge would have a rear setback variance and a lot coverage variance and could possibly redesign without having to come back to the board.
I
That
see.
was my thinking on that. I know that's a little
I'm-
different, unusual. I'm not trying to,
I
to
appreciate
lead
it.
you in that direction, but
Well,
if you would deny the entire thing as a package, and he revised the garage on the side, he'd still have to come back to
Still
the
have to
board
come back. I
for rear
understand.
variance and maybe not a coverage variance, but he would at least have to come back to the board. So that was just my thinking
That's
on that.
very
Not that I'm advocating one way or the other. If you want to treat it as a package, that's fine. And if denied, Mr. Karageorge can come back with another
okay.
application,
I think
and I guess it would be treated as a package then also.
that explained that way, I think that it would be, would you all be willing to do it that way? Because it will take a little longer, but I think it might be, it might give us a little bit more flexibility in our decision.
Right.
I'll propose a motion to grant two variances.
To work on, well, there's actually, let me see, he's got to, the three variances that he needs a variance from the bulk controls. He needs,
Now, we have to address all three, whether
rear
individually
yard
or
setback.
together. That's because what they're
Okay.
asking, so we have to go with what this is right here.
90% of the homes are
If I could, what I was trying to illustrate, and I think someone did mention that if the answer to one of the three is no, any one of the three, then it's, the answer is no variance. Any one of those three.
but if we do a 2 or 3 part statement, then it would be possible for him to
Well, if it is possible for him to do with just 2 variants, then we should maybe just ignore the other one. Just find out what is it exactly the minimum that he needs to have.
He's requesting variances, and we have to address his request. So he's requesting a variance from 2311 Table A
Right.
to permit a structure with a left yard setback of 3.9 feet where 8 is the permitted minimum. That's part. A rear yard setback of 25.017 feet where 30 feet is permitted minimum. And lot coverage of 32, okay.
And my understanding is that he has to have all 3. If he could do by 2, then we should consider 2. What is the minimum that he needs so he can do
Well,
his building?
He needs to have all of it.
So we should consider all
If he
three.
was going to do the
it's
building
one
exactly
package.
that way. But what Steve is saying is that he would be able to make some adjustments if we were saying, for instance, were permitted the lot coverage of 32.4 where 30% is. That's not a problem.
Well,
That's fairly minimal. We're just 2.4% as opposed,
and
more.
what John's point was that the professional opinion of the professional builder stated that this is either this or nothing. They can't, they won't.
It's never nothing.
I know, but they said they
Honestly.
won't, they
Well,
can't
if they
change.
can't, if they
And he
can't
doesn't
do,
have a vested interest in it.
So,
No.
so it's one package. It's either this, you
Well,
treat it as one.
and if they can redesign with only 2 variants, then that's what we should be considering. Then they should be changed.
Mr. Carrigeorge,
Steve's
would you
just
like
making
to make a
suggestion.
statement by any chance? Because we could reopen it if you would like to.
No, I feel that based on the storage that I have, that I need all 3 variances to build what could be on this house, or I need to possibly
it's-
find somewhere else to live.
All or nothing.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
based on the fact that I don't have a basement, that the laundry room is very tight now, and basically, when Scott put together the plans, the laundry room would stay the same width, and I've got pictures of those, because I know the last time you were asked, I can show you those if you'd like. You had asked me about, excuse the window. This is the laundry room from the far wall looking out the window. This is the upstairs from the far wall looking towards the other side. This is the downstairs bedroom that I'm currently using as a study from the far wall looking to the next wall. And this is my current bedroom looking from the far wall to the door. The problem, I mean, it's a very nice house and I enjoyed it. This was supposed to be a starter house when I bought it. My mother lives very close in the neighborhood. My uncle lives very close. I was born and raised on that end of town. I'd like to stay there. But I'm finding I'm losing closet space, and you've got an outbuilding to try to put a lawnmower in and things of that nature. And I feel I've got an SUV and a regular car, and the garage that's currently built was not made for either one. And a Toyota Avalon I don't feel is a huge car. Okay. But to put them side by side and have maybe a workbench or some storage in the garage and still maintain what you can see is a pretty cramped laundry room. We trim back, believe me, to be quite blunt, we didn't want to come here. I didn't. We
Whatever
trim
wants
back.
to.
Well, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just saying, I
Nobody
would have
wants to.
rather put something together that we could do without coming here and asking for this. But based on the storage that I have and the dimensions of the house, I feel that I need all 3 to be able to build this. My professional builder believes the same thing. I just can't see any other way. If I could grab the house and move it to the right-hand side, it would be wonderful. But you're looking at a brick structure that was built right smack dab in the middle of the 2 lots. And the bedrooms are on the right-hand side, so if you were to build on that side, it would be impractical.
Yeah.
You could take it higher, but it would look terrible. And we went over several design aspects of saying, forget about the side, let's build up. To be quite honest, I've had 70 operations, and I'm looking at putting in handicap toilets and things of that nature because I'm going to have 2 knee replacements, and at my age, you know, I need to make sure that there's enough slope in the steps that I can use the structure 10 years down the road. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth the expense of, you know, converting this. So, and you can see, as I said, that the only 2 closets that you have are the ones in the bedroom that are presented in the pictures. So, I feel that I need all 3, or
You don't have any storage space.
You
I
answered,
don't.
you answered the questions.
No basement.
That's what we needed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we really are closed. And I think, under the circumstances, that we probably ought to just go ahead with the variance request as a chunk, to put it, you know, in the technical phraseology. Would somebody like to do the chunk?
I'll do it.
Okay.
I move that in the case of case 6-16V Zone R2, 12 Strathmore Boulevard, James Carey George appellant, that we grant a variance or variances from section 23.11 table A schedule of bulk controls to permit it in addition to an existing single family structure with a left yard setback of 3.9 feet, where 8 feet is the permitted minimum, a rear yard setback of 25.017 feet, where 30 feet is the permitted minimum, and lot coverage of 32.4%, where 30% is the permitted maximum.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Okay, then to examine discuss the findings for practical difficulty or undue hardship. Well, I think we've discussed fairly thoroughly what that would be. It's the fact of it.
2 lots.
The 2 lots, position of a brick house, just expositioned so in such a way that it is too close to one side. It wasn't put in the center of the 2 lots. It was put off to one side. And that's the exceptional condition and exceptional circumstance also. Preservation of equal property rights. Does anybody want to address that? From what I've seen, if no one else cares to, from what I've seen, other properties in the same district have got setbacks that are similar to this. Don't know about the lot coverage. We haven't addressed that.
And you don't know how recent those were. I mean, those could have been built back when that house was built too, in position where they are positioned today.
Yes, but if we were to well, I haven't a problem with this one. Anybody else want to speak to this one? Because I seem to be running out of steam. Is there a problem with preservation of equal property rights?
I'm not sure that it's required to have a garage wide enough for 2 SUVs and storage of a lawnmower to preserve equal property right.
Unless you don't happen to have a basement or any other storage available.
Yeah, it doesn't seem unreasonable what they're asking for, actually, when you look at what they currently have and what they're trying to live with. Most people expect to be able to find a place for their lawnmower. Most people expect to be able to find a place to put the Christmas tree ornaments when they're through using them, to have some storage space. And this house has no attic and no cellar. The attic is sleeping space, from what I can gather, and it's on a slab. So,
And the SUV doors are all both open at the same time.
well, he did point out that he's not looking for 2 SUV space, but yeah. Still,
Just looking for extra storage space.
extra storage
You need
space,
some.
and that's not unreasonable. That is not something that anyone would consider to be an unreasonable thing for
I wouldn't think so.
so. Now, the one that I keep on stumbling over is the minimum variance.
Well, each one individually, is minimal, really. And since this is a package, I think overall, I see it as minimal. It's 25 versus 30, 32.4 versus 30%, and 3.9 versus 8. So each one individually is not outrageously high. So.
Yeah, Betty shared with me her concern that she wasn't going to be able to be here to say that she did find that each one individually was minimal. She found that taken in the aggregate, she wasn't so sure about that.
Well, it takes these three elements to make it usable,
Yes.
use of the property. So I think I see it as minimal.
Okay, good. Then detriment, all of the neighbors who sent us letters seem to find there is no detriment. And looking at the pictures and looking at the property itself, I can't see that it would cause a detriment. It's not going to be getting in the way any more than any of the other houses are in the way of each other that are even closer together. It's not going to go up so high as to cause a problem of light or air. So it seems that we're finding for the detriment. And then not of a general nature, the variance is not something that should be handled by changing the law. Houses are not currently being plopped down that close to a property line.
And they have two-car garages too.
Well, some do. I don't have one.
If you build a new home today with a one-car
Yes.
garage, you really ought to go see a psychiatrist.
Okay. Professionally said. Okay. All right. Then, does anybody have anything further he wants to say, or are we ready to vote? Would you like to start, David?
I'll
Did I
vote no.
hear? You'll vote no.
I'll vote no.
Yes.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So you have your variance. Yeah. I thank you for the pictures. They do speak better than 1,000 words. It made it very plain what you needed. Yeah, thank you. You may want to put them in the record. Do you want his photographs?
Yeah, that'd be
It convinced me.
All right.
But I love the way your house looks now. I hope you make it just as pretty as it currently is. It's a beautiful house. Uh-huh. It's a very pretty house. Yes.
I want to apologize for being late. My secretary was not home, and I didn't realize I needed to be here at 7, and I thought it was 7:30.
We rarely get a quality time. Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Okay.
My wife was good. My wife's gone. She'd have told me 7.
Okay. The next case is the one that's being for 121 Morris Avenue, 0617V, is not going to be heard until next month. Do we need to vote on that, Steve, or is it just?
If I could make a little explanation.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, I know the board wondered why the appellant was not present, and I'd indicated, and looking at the file, that I had done all the written notifications. What happened was I received a call the day after the meeting, and the appellant had been out of town, didn't realize, not being from the area, they don't know the second Tuesday of every month is when the zoning board meets. They just knew they had a hearing coming up. Wednesday after the meeting, they opened their mail that had been accumulating while they were gone and went, oh, we should have been at the zoning board last night. So that's what happened. It wasn't neglect, or they didn't just forget about it or something like that. It was just an unfortunate circumstance. What happened in that same conversation, though, was they were also not going to be able to be in town tonight. and it asked that the case be continued just until the next meeting.
Well, in that case, just in case it needs to be done that way, I move that we continue it to our next meeting on the 12th of September.
Second.
Thank you. Is everybody in favor of doing that?
Yeah.
Same.
Good, okay. Okay, then our other case this evening then is 0620V for 7 West Stimson Avenue. It's zoned B3, and Hocking Valley Bank is the appellant, requesting variances to permit 2 roof signs where such signs are not listed. Would you like to, is there any comment that you feel would be appropriate here, Steve?
The sign ordinance was revised prior to the revision of the 2003 revisions to the zoning code, and those changes were sponsored by the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce. The original sign ordinance was adopted, or our existing ordinance, without many revisions, in 1989. Some jurisdictions have certain signs that are specifically prohibited, and there is a list in the Athens City Code pertaining to signs about certain signs that are prohibited. A roof-mounted sign is not one that is specifically prohibited. All right, not like searchlights. There's some things in the code that just say they're just not permitted as signs. However, the Athens ordinance has structural types and classification types that are permitted. And then it also has a section that says any sign not specifically permitted is prohibited. All right, now, I've been here 12 years, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen an application before this for a roof-mounted sign. As far as I know, the only 2 roof-mounted signs in town are one that's over at Economy Supply. When you pull up to the back porch before you go in the building, they've got like a little awning roof that comes out, and the building's very tall. And there's a sign that's mounted on the roof of the little porch before you go into Economy. The only other sign that I can think of that's mounted on a roof is right up the street here on Court Street, on top of Mr. LaRue's building, halfway up the block on the right-hand side or the east side. That's a flat roof, and it has a sign that kind of projects up like a little miniature billboard, or you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it sticks way up above the structure, much higher than the roof and well above the structure. So those are the only 2 I can think of that do exist in town. The reason that roof signs would be prohibited for some reason, the only reason I can think of is possibly, most of these would be imagined to be well above the roof, I would think, just like the one up here on Court Street. That may or may not be the case. That might be why they're prohibited. Saying all that, I think if you look at the drawings, there's a color drawing. It's a little larger. I photocopied that, and it's smaller. But that should give you a better idea of what this particular roof-mounted sign is going to be.
The signs actually aren't going to be as high as the cone of the roof, or the ridge of the roof.
A wall sign, the code permits a wall sign to go up a wall and extend 3 feet above the intersection of the wall and the roof. Now, also the code allows for signs on mansard roofs, which is it was originally designed by Mr. Mansard in France to avoid taxes, because taxes were based on the number of stories that you had. So he just tipped the roof up. He didn't have to pay tax in France at the time on attic space. So that's where mansard roofs came from. But the code allows for a sign on a mansard roof or on a wall. And in that case, too, it's also allowed to project up 3 feet higher than the intersection of the roof line and the wall line. These 2 particular signs are about 3 feet by 12 feet, so they're not excessively large. They are lighted. One sign you'll be able to see coming up Palmer Street. You won't be able to see it on Stimson. It'll be on the back, on the roof over the drive-through. And basically that whole side of the building is drive-through. On the other side, same size sign, it'll be facing toward the post office. There's not much wall there to work with because of the windows in the addition. If you look at the floor plan, or the site plan, it shows you the existing footprint of the Hocking Valley Bank and then the footprint of the proposed addition, which is all single-story with a roof on it. So there's not much opportunity.
Yeah, there. Because this is the side entrance.
There's not much opportunity for additional wall signage just because of the type of construction. If that was a wall or a mansard roof, you could have a sign up to 30% of the area of that wall, which is a huge sign. It just so happens that the way the code's written, a sign on a roof is not permitted.
Tell me about lighted signs are permitted now.
Lighted signs are permitted. I did not refuse the permit for the lighting of the sign. Now, this is in a B3 general business district. Lighted signs are permitted.
It's because it's B3 that it's permitted.
Right. There is a prohibition in R3 zones. There are professional offices and some other light business uses that are permitted in R3 multifamily zones. However, for signage, lighted sign is permitted in an R3 zone, but the light has to go out when you're not conducting business.
Steve,
But in a B3, signs can be lit.
if we grant the variance, let's say in 6 months, they say we're gonna keep the same signs in the location, but we're gonna put one of those LED type, flashing that the other bank is doing. Can they do that? Or do they have to come back to us? They can change the type if they want to, right?
Right. About 2 months ago, I presented information to the Planning Commission concerning changeable copy signs because Athens sign ordinance does allow changeable copy. What's happening though is you're having an evolution in the industry, and electronic signs, not hand-changed signs, are starting to, well, I don't know why they haven't made it here yet. If you've been to other towns, they're all over the place in a lot of other towns.
That sign at the Hocking Valley Bank that shows the temperature and the time, that's your flashing sign.
The code,
But I'm just saying, this is an illustration of
Right.
how common they are, and actually it's helpful to be able to see what temperature.
well, I think time and temperature signs changing electronically were one of the first things that were done. They are permitted by the code. They can change every minute. Changeable copy, though, our code does not distinguish between manual changeable and electronic changeable. Like I said, I presented this to the Planning Commission 2 months ago. So hopefully they'll they'll have some consideration about revising our current code. Are those type of signs going to be permitted or not? Right now, I don't think I can deny them. They're changeable copy. The question then became, how often can the sign change without violating the section that says motion to create attention is not permitted. The Planning Commission at their last meeting gave me some guidance and said so long as the sign doesn't change any more often than once per day, essentially changing the same as if you had a hand change copy sign. Hopefully there'll be some consideration to revise the code because these electronic signs they're coming. They're the wave. Long John Silver's wants to put one up right now. I talked to the company in Mississippi that wants to provide the signs. They do all the signs for Yum brand foods, which is Long John's and Pizza Hut and all over the country. Anyway, I guess I'll stop on that. They could put up an electronic sign right now if they wanted to, but it couldn't change any more than once a day.
Okay.
They're not asking for that, though. They're asking for a fixed face logo type sign, backlighting with it.
Can we add the condition that they should keep it the same type?
Sure, you could. The board's allowed to attach any kind of conditions or restrictions they want on a variance to safeguard the integrity of the code. And so, yes, you could say that they could not be changed out they couldn't be. This was a permit for the sign as specifically requested.
Okay.
And I think that would be sufficient. I think the language the board's used in the past is in accordance, in substantial compliance with the plans as submitted. So an electronic changeable copy sign would be much different than that sign, for those two signs.
Yeah, I don't
more
want to see like a little
okay.
TV screen up there.
Good, good. Okay. Any other questions for Steve?
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
All right,
Well, we're ready to hear the presentation from Art.
Scott Isley, president of Hocking Valley Bank, 7 West Stimson Avenue. And from what I understand, the request that we have made is primarily because there's nothing in the code addressing what we're wanting to do down there. As you can see from the drawing, it's mounting a sign on a pitched roof. And it's pretty self-explanatory what we're asking. I think it's in the way it's being presented. It's in the spirit of the sign ordinance, as I stated in my response to you, that it's not overbearing. It's not,
Yeah,
you know,
normal looking sign.
not going to be blinking and flashing at you and things of that nature. We'd have no desire to do that, or we would be asking for that kind of sign if we had it. It's also, if the other sign we have is a backlit, it's lit from the back, and Larry can explain to you the mechanics of how it works, but it's not going to project, it's just going to be able to see the logo in the evening. So it's pretty simple, really.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? And yeah, you can see why you need to put the signs where you need to put them, because there isn't any place else to put
Well,
them.
the other thing I point out, the alternative is if we don't do that, but you want to put us a pole out on the corner, we have a corner lot, and we can, it would not present itself very professional at all.
You're supposed to look classy.
I'm really impressed with this illustration.
I came up with it. No, actually, we have architecture firm that put that together.
But it makes it real easy.
Yeah. And we would accept the condition. We're not going to put any light. We're not going to. We did put a time and temperature sign back when Sarah Hendrick was in, and before Steve was even here. We did get turned down. We went and got a variance. And so when that sign was put on East State Street, we did go through the process of doing that, and we would be the same.
We'd miss it if you took it down.
Yeah, we would. Just keeping it right is the problem.
I check it every time I go by. It seems to be right on.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Questions?
no questions, I guess. Thank you very much.
I'm Larry Van Dyke from Performance Signs. I will be manufacturing and installing the signs, so if you have any questions as far as what the sign really is, I can answer for you.
Any questions or?
What really is the sign? Is it plexiglass? Is it?
The cabinet will be extruded aluminum tube framing. If you look at the front there, your normal signs, about 95% of them you see as a polycarbonate front, which fully illuminates. This situation, you're going to have probably pretty close to 40% of that sign blocked. The light will be blocked out because all you will be illuminating is the actual HVB logo. The rest of it will be completely blocked out. So what you see green there will be lit. The white will not.
Oh.
So basically that sign there will be cut down in brightness by about 40% than a normal wall sign.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the roof is going to be green, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you think we should know about it? No. Any questions? Right, I guess,
Okay,
thank you very much. Obviously, there's no one
yeah.
here. Oh, do we have some general comment?
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask if I can come up there a minute to look at something before I make a
Sure,
remark.
please do come up.
I studied the drawings in the office, but I need to ask a question about the drawing. Now, this is the existing Stimson Avenue. This is Palmer. This is an addition.
Post office over here.
The addition
Is this?
is this.
There must be a sign here.
Now, this is the old building, right?
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then he's taking that parking away and he's putting the sign there and there, right?
I actually took the paint store out and put
Oh.
that in there.
Is
Where
that
the
where
paint
he-
Wraps.
Wraps paint.
Wraps
Okay,
is
he's
gone.
putting,
So
oh, it's in Palmer,
the
right?
sign here and
Paint store.
here.
So when you come down this street, you don't see any sign.
You'll see this
This
sign.
one?
You'll see the sign here.
This is a sign you'll see.
Yeah.
This is- See, the reason I had a problem was I was wondering, well, I'll go to the, I'm Joseph Richard Sligo, and you happen to be looking at someone that was on the adoption of the sign ordinance. I worked with, and I remember, now I wish I had made a tape recording of everything that happened in the discussions, because let me just point out something. I live at 102 North Lancaster Street. My first reaction when I looked at this, now wait a minute, why do you need those signs? That's my first question. Why do you need any sign at all? Because when I go down Stimson, I see the bank sign, I know the bank's there, I know what it looks like. Well, the answer is he has to tell people that are on Palmer Street, what's that building? Is that why the two signs are there? I'm asking a question. So my first initial reaction was, and also the lighting bothered me, but the way it's explained to me is the light's on all the time, 24 hours a day. Will the light be off at night? On the sign, on the two signs? Oh, when do you turn the sign off?
Probably be an electric eye on it.
Yeah, the electric eye or time.
Oh, in other words, when the sun goes down, those two signs go out?
No, they come
They go
on.
on.
Oh, they come on. Oh. Now let me see. In the daytime, I can see the signs on Palmer Street. I know it's a bank. And at night, why do I have to see the signs?
You don't ever have to see it if you don't want to.
No, I'm asking a question of why do they need
Why
the
does
two
it, why is
signs?
the bank,
Because
why is the
They want
need
people to know it's there. That's why you put any sign up.
but why does it have to be on the roof? Couldn't it be just right below the roof line?
If you look at the the drawings here, you can see that the way the building is made, there isn't a place to put the sign below the roof line.
Oh, he couldn't bring it down here.
No, there isn't any place for it there.
Oh, I see.
Or here.
Now, the signs are curved. Now, I try to remember when you understand, I'm not like these novelists, writers of novels that invent conversations. I don't do that. I don't say, well, we had a discussion, and this is what happened. I do remember this much about this roof sign business. There were more places that had signs that went above the roof. There used to be one by the BP station. As you go down toward the barber shop on the right, there used to be a sign sitting up there.
Still is.
There,
Okay, and did you mention that one?
yes.
Oh, is that the one that belongs to, okay, that's on North Congress Street.
Michael
North
Rue,
Court,
that's
okay.
Michael Rue's
Okay.
building.
Okay, now what I'm leading up to is, I think the signs are in good shape, good taste. I did not understand until now why you needed the signs lit at night. You understand what I'm saying? Because I'm used to seeing Stimson Avenue, the banks there, and the traffic on Palmer. Why would it have to know? But I'm not going to oppose it on that ground. I'm going to simply say that one of the things we tried to do when we wrote the sign ordinance, you'll be interested in this remark. We didn't want to become like Nelsonville was at the time. Now, you won't find that in the public record, but what we were worried about, these signs that were flashing as you came down the main street of Nelsonville and other places, that's what we were really concerned about. And then about the flickering lights on the signs, I remember we didn't want flashing signs of any kind. And all I'm simply going to say is, well, if you feel you need the sign and it's not all that bright, it's not going to bother the neighborhoods. And Mr. Pearson and I discussed this today because I did not realize that B3 was so different from the other zones with respect to the lighting. So I think I want to compliment the people that did this. This is the first time that I think a business has ever come in with such beautiful pictures that I can understand what's going on, and I want to compliment them. And so I would simply say the board should use good judgment, and I see no problem with it, because I didn't understand why you needed the signs in the first place on the roof, and you can't put them another place. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for explaining things. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. There being no further discussion from opposition, it doesn't seem. Do you have anything further that you want to say? Because this is the point that you can make a summation if you care to. No. Okay, then the discussion from the floor is closed, and we're ready to do our decision. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion if I could add those conditions to it.
You can do whatever you like with your motion. It can be
Okay.
seconded or not.
I move to grant the variance to the case 0620V Zone B3, 7 West Stimson Avenue, Hocking Valley Bank appellant from section 230313 DNS to permit 2 roof-mounted non-changing signs as submitted in the plans, where such signs are not listed as a permitted structural type and therefore prohibited.
Okay, and as
As submitted in the plans.
yeah, right. Just
You remarked about that when you said.
yeah. Okay, so that it exactly the signs that you've
Plans as
shown in the
submitted.
plans.
It's a
yeah.
non-changing sign as
Okay.
submitted in the plans.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Great. So what is? Let's see. This is a variance, so we have to go through the findings and practical difficulty. Wall space for putting on a sign. It seems that practically it wouldn't be possible to put a sign on the building on this side that is needed. Is that what we think?
Is this a variance?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But it says that mounted where such signs are not listed.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
difficulty.
The reason
well.
that we have to do a variance is because the code says that if it's not listed, it's not permitted.
So this
So-
isn't listed, so it's not
Okay.
permitted. It's catch 22, so
Understand.
that makes it
Sure.
a hardship and difficulty in an exceptional
Okay.
circumstance as well.
Is it really a hardship or difficulty not to be able to put 2 additional signs on a building? It already is
Since it
pretty
goes
clearly
around a
marked.
corner, yeah, you can only identify your business for traffic on one street. You can't identify your business for traffic on another street. I think that's a bit of a difficulty. So, to me anyway, we may disagree.
The only people drive by and say, what is that, a warehouse?
Yeah,
There's no sign.
yeah. Actually, most of the traffic probably would be coming on Stimson, but not necessarily all. So that would be the practical difficulty. Whether that's an undue hardship, I think so. In business, you need to have people know where you are. Exceptional circumstances. Well,
You don't have any wall space. That would be an exceptional circumstance. 99% of the time, you'd put it out on a wall.
yes. Okay.
And there's no space in front or on the side, right? On Palmer Street to put a freestanding sign.
It probably could, but it would get in the way of
It'd
things.
be
It would be
more
more
problematic
of a
than
problem.
one on
Yeah.
a roof.
And I don't think it would be in any way an improvement. I think these signs look nice. I like the way they look. I don't see
They
how
blend
putting it on
into the
it-
building.
Right.
They don't draw attention to themselves.
Yeah. And preservation of equal property rights. Other places are permitted to have signs identifying the business for whichever direction you're coming at the business. I don't think that it's a special privilege to be able to identify your building.
Kind of
Anybody
business
disagree?
necessity.
Yeah. All right, minimum variance, since they have not requested an overly large sign, nor anything that really is substantially higher than it would have been had it been attached to the front of the building, it seems to me that it would be minimal.
Certainly is.
Yeah. Detriment, putting the sign on the building would not be a detriment to adjacent properties, I can't see how it would. And the purpose of the code is not to prevent people from identifying their business. It's simply to make sure that things are tasteful, and it seems that this is going to do it. Not of a general nature?
This is where I have a question. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for the sign ordinance to be clarified?
It seems that since it says it's phrased that it's not general or recurring, I've not ever encountered another one of these. So
Since it's not
it's not
general.
recurring. I don't think it would have made sense in the first place if they'd addressed this. But it's the first time it's come up to us. Maybe if it comes up 5 or 6 more times.
It may now.
Yeah. I don't think a whole lot of people are, or at least, there don't seem to be a whole lot of instances where buildings are constructed in such a way that they can't put the sign on the building itself. I think that generally is the preference. So I don't really think that it needs to have the law changed, but we might find differently in a week, in a month or two. So, anybody, anything else? Are we ready to
Vote?
vote?
Yeah, yes,
Would you like to start?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes and yes, okay.
Yes.
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 And I too vote yes. Beautiful signs, hope they go up soon. 5 to 5, yeah. 5 to 0.
Is that gonna be a tin roof?
What kind of roof
Is
is
that
it?
gonna be a tin roof? Don't tell me copper.
No. We're not a copper kind of town, not yet anyway.
Sure. I thought perhaps it was, your illustration looked like it.
Okay,
Here is the little flat piece right
It'll be where you put your air conditioners and things, huh?
Actually, they're on the side, and there's a screen built in front of them. We had to put it
Oh,
on low.
I thought maybe you're gonna roof mount since you had that flat.
No, they won't keep as many things out of that.
but thank you very much. All right, we have only one thing left, and that's disposition of the minutes from July 13. Did everybody get a chance to read them? Or did anybody get a chance to read them?
Everything looked all right to me.
You're out of it. You're off the hook. Excuse me, did I hear yes?
Yes.
Everyone's read them? Are there any corrections to be made? Then may I, can someone make a motion to accept them?
I move we
Okay,
accept them.
anybody object?
Second.
Okay, good. And everyone agrees that they're acceptable?
Yes.
Good, they're good. And then we're adjourned.
Okay, I still want to apologize for being late.
Senior moment.